Hey, I'm Gabrielle, and I want to tell you about a mysterious baby I found on my doorstep. Okay, so I never wanted to get married and have babies. I mean, kids are a nightmare, right? You become a mom and your life's over. No more partying and having fun. It's all diapers and bottles. All that changed one night. I'd been out clubbing, so I didn't get home until late. I tripped over something on my doorstep. It made a strange noise, and I thought someone had left a basket of kittens for me. But then I looked closer, and I realized someone had put a baby on my doorstep. I took it into my apartment and found a note tucked into the Moses basket. It said, "This is your baby. You got me pregnant, and I can't afford to look after her, so she's your responsibility now. Her name is Heather. Please, love her as much as I do." What? Clearly, there'd been a mistake. I'd bought my apartment recently, so the baby must have been meant for the guy who lived here before me. Well, I wasn't going to keep her, obviously. I called the cops, and they said they'd come with someone from CPS to take the baby. But while I waited for them to arrive, I was cuddling Heather, and she was so cute. She had a tiny little button nose and adorable big blue eyes. She was beautiful. The cops showed up with a lady from CPS. I asked what they are going to do with Heather, and they said she'd probably go into foster care and then be adopted. But if no one wanted her, she'd probably spend her life in foster homes. I couldn't let that happen. She had a mom who loved her, even if she couldn't care for her. What if she changed her mind? She'd never get her daughter back. So I did something crazy. I asked if I could keep her. Of course, it wasn't easy. I had to have interviews and assessments to make sure I'd be a good parent. It was a lot of stress, but I had a good job.
What? Don't kill these innocent people. Oh, what disgrace me and kick me out? Well, you're not invited to my birthday party. Fine, I'll just leave. I'll take
Job with plenty of savings, and at last, Heather came home to live with me. Once Heather was mine, I wondered whether I'd done the right thing. It's hard work looking after a baby, and when your baby cries all night, it's hard to do a good job the next day. I was head of marketing at a fashion label, so I was seriously regretting adopting Heather. But then I hired Charlene, my neighbor, as a live-in nanny. She saved my life. She moved in with us right away. She was the one who got up in the middle of the night to give Heather a bottle so I could sleep. Charlene was awesome. She looked after Heather while I was at work, took her to all the mommy and me classes, and made sure my baby got plenty of cuddles when I wasn't there. I looked after Heather at the weekend so Charlene could have a break, but most of the time she would insist on hanging out with us. Things were great for a while, but when Heather started school, I told Charlene we didn't need her anymore. She started crying, and she didn't want to leave. She said we were like family. We agreed Charlene could stay on as my housekeeper. She cleaned while Heather was at school. Then she looked after her until I came home from work. Heather loved that Charlene was still living with us. She called her my second mommy. But not long after Heather's 10th birthday, I lost my job when the company I was working for went bust. But nobody wanted to hire me. I was so high level and experienced, it was hard to find the same kind of job. When I applied for lower positions, everyone said I was overqualified. I had enough money saved up to pay my bills for a few months, but if I didn't find another job soon, we were going to be in trouble. It absolutely broke my heart. But I had to let Charlene go. She begged me not to sack her. She said she'd work for nothing as long as she could stay with us. But it made me really uncomfortable, to be honest. She threw herself on her knees, tugging at my clothes and screaming she couldn't leave us. I grabbed her bag, and as I was handing it to her, it fell on the floor. To my shock, pictures of my daughter fell out of her bag. I quickly grabbed the pictures, and I couldn't believe it. She had literally taken pictures of my daughter every day. I was angry, and I wanted her out of my house quickly, so I called the cops. But then she was gone. I didn't tell Heather about the big scene with Charlene. I couldn't upset her. She loved her nanny so much. So when I told her she wasn't going to live with us anymore, she burst into tears. She asked if she could meet up with Charlene, but I said no. Heather yelled at me that I was a terrible mom, and Charlene was a better mom than I could ever be. Then she stomped off to her room, slamming the door behind her. A couple months later, I was still looking for work, but no one wanted to hire me, so I decided to set up my own marketing agency. To save money, I worked from home, which meant I could spend more time with Heather. But Heather didn't want to hang out. She was still mad at me for sending Charlene away, so whenever I asked her if she wanted to go to the movies or the mall, she said no. Until one day, Heather told me she'd joined the choir at school, so she was going to be home late some nights because she needed to practice. She said one of the other moms was going to bring her back. I was just happy Heather was doing something that got her out of her room. So I told her she could be in the choir as long as she kept her cell with her and always told me where she was. Heather agreed, and for the first time in ages, she gave me a big hug. She had such a happy smile on her face. What Heather didn't know was I'd installed one of those apps on her phone that let you know where the cell was at all times. The first time she said she was at choir practice, her cell was at school the whole afternoon. But the next time she was supposed to be at choir, her cell left school and went downtown. I raced out of my apartment and got in a cab to find where my daughter had gone. She was in a diner with Charlene. I stormed in and grabbed Heather. "Why are you here? When you're supposed to be at choir," I said. Charlene was really apologetic. She said it was her fault, but she missed Heather so much she had to see her. I told her to stay away from my daughter or I'll get her arrested. I told Heather she had to quit choir, but she cried. So I said she could still be in it, but had to come straight home afterwards. I couldn't trust her not to sneak off and see Charlene again. A couple weeks later, I decided to surprise Heather after school by picking her up and taking her for a manicure. But as I got closer to the school, I saw Charlene waiting by the gates. I went up to her and asked what she was doing. She looked embarrassed and said she just happened to be in the neighborhood. I didn't believe her. She lived on the other side of town. Then Heather came out of school. She saw me talking to Charlene. She went bright red. It was obvious they'd arranged to meet up. That was it. I got a restraining order out on Charlene. She was too obsessed with my daughter. I thought that would be the end of it. But my nightmare was just beginning. Heather got really depressed after I made Charlene leave us alone. She spent all her time locked in her room and only came out for meals. She wouldn't talk to me, even when I offered to take her shopping for new clothes. So when I called her for dinner one night and she didn't answer, I thought she was sulking in her room. "That's enough, young lady. This rudeness ends now," I said as I went into her room, but it was empty. I looked all over our apartment, but I couldn't find her anywhere. My daughter was missing. I called the cops. At first, they told me she was just being a teenager and not to worry, but when I told them about the restraining order I had against Charlene, they sent someone round straight away. I was so worried. Anything could happen to my baby. What was Charlene's deal? Why was she so obsessed with my daughter? It wasn't normal for a nanny to act like this. The police told me to stay in my apartment while they looked for Heather, but I hated sitting around doing nothing. I had to do something. So I went on social media and shared pictures of Heather and Charlene, asking people to contact me if they'd seen them. And then I got a PM from a woman who lived a couple 100 miles away. She said she was sure she'd seen them staying in the same motel she was in. I forwarded my message to the cops and got straight into my car. I broke every speed limit going, but I didn't care. I had to save my daughter. When I got to the motel, there were cops everywhere. I raced over to them, but they wouldn't let me through. "What's wrong?" I yelled. "Let me get my daughter." That's when they told me Charlene had a gun, and she was threatening to hurt Heather if they didn't leave them alone. I screamed and tried to fight my way through the cops to talk to Charlene, but they were too strong. "Heather!" I cried out for my daughter, hoping she could hear me and know how much I loved her. Suddenly, there was a gunshot. My heart skipped a beat. Was my daughter dead? "Mom!" I heard Heather calling for me. I ran towards the sound of her voice as she came running out of the motel room. This time, the police let me through, and we fell into each other's arms, sobbing. She said Charlene had fired a warning shot, but the police had tasered her before anyone could get hurt. Not long after, they brought Charlene out in handcuffs. "Why?" I asked. "Because Heather's my daughter," said Charlene. She told me when she saw me, she knew I'd be a good person to look after her baby. I had a job and a stable life, and while she was an alcohol addict, she knew that childcare will take the baby away from her, so she decided to raise her in the house next door. She also watched me and Heather from my house window 24/7 until she heard I was looking for a nanny. She realized this was her chance to stay close to her daughter. She then started laughing hysterically. It was really creepy. "Why would you threaten to hurt your daughter then if you love her so much?" I screamed. She was quiet for a moment before she said, "If I can't have her, no one else should." That's when the police took her away. Heather and I were traumatized by what happened, but we're having therapy together, and it's really helping. Charlene got sent to a mental institute. She's still there, but if she ever gets out, there's no way I'm letting her anywhere near my daughter. I hope you enjoyed my story. Like, comment, and share if you want more videos.
You are the